This is my son's and my house. Don't interfere.
My mother-in-law was trying to sell my house without knowing anything about the situation. However, a buyer appeared, and it turned out to be a huge surprise for my mother-in-law. My name is Emma. I am a 34-year-old banker. I was divorced, but I remarried 2 years ago. I don't mean to brag, but I have a decent amount of savings. The reason is that I worked harder after my divorce at the age of 22 and saved my salary every month because I didn't have much to spend on. Also, my ex-husband cheated on me, so I received compensation from him and the other woman, but I didn't use most of it, so I kept it. I saved it not so much for remarriage, but because I didn't know what would happen to me in the future. Then I met my current husband and remarried about 2 years ago. We met through work, but at first, I only had the impression that we got along well. I never thought it would develop into a romantic relationship, but when my husband confessed to me, I thought he would be a good person to spend the rest of my life with. I thought I could spend my life with him anywhere. That was until the 3rd month of our marriage. At that time, something happened that caused a big change in our relationship. One day in the 3rd month of our marriage, I was relaxing at home watching a movie because I had the day off from work. Then my husband came home after 3 p.m. with an anxious expression on his face. I noticed that he looked unwell, so I asked him in a light tone, "What's wrong? Are you okay? Or is it too early? Did you have the day off in the afternoon?" But my husband sighed deeply and seemed to be struggling to speak. Something was up. Was it a mistake at work or something else? I waited for my husband to speak, and he opened his mouth with a sigh.
Emma. Actually, there's something I need to tell you.
From my husband's heavy atmosphere and expression at that time, I sensed that something serious had happened. I was worried, but I had to remain calm. I took a deep breath and spoke to my husband. "Tell me anything. I'll listen and understand." After hearing that, my husband also took a deep breath and remained silent for a while, looking anxious. And finally, he spoke with a heavy heart.
Actually, before we got married, I borrowed money without telling you, Emma.
What? I couldn't believe my ears at the sudden news. What on earth was going on? Then my husband began to explain further.
Recently, our household finances have been tight, and I couldn't pay it back.
After remarrying, I left all the household finances to my husband. I actually wanted to take care of it myself, but he refused. The reason was that he was the breadwinner and wanted to do it himself. I thought it would be okay because of his personality, so I didn't think anything of it at the time. So I thought there was no problem with the household finances. I had a mix of surprise and a slight anger at the sudden confession. Why didn't you tell me? If you had told me about the debt before we got married, I might have been able to help. Does your mom know about this? My husband answered with a regretful expression, holding his head in his hands.
I'm sorry. Mom doesn't know.
Why not? I was skeptical of his answer that his mother didn't know. I thought it was natural for her to know if he had borrowed money before we got married. Then he began to talk about the debt.
I thought I could pay it back right away. So I've been desperately hiding it. And Mom has always been nagging me about money, so I thought she would get angry if she found out I was in debt.
I was disappointed in my husband for the first time on this day due to his pathetic reason. I thought we had a relationship where we could talk about anything after getting married, but I never thought he was hiding a secret from before we got married. I asked him about the use of the debt, even though I was amazed. If it was a necessary expense, I could understand it. So I was going to say a lot after asking, but the use of the debt was too trivial. My husband had spent a lot of money on hobbies and entertainment, such as luxury cars, luxurious trips, and expensive brand name products, for his own pleasure even before we got married. However, his lifestyle far exceeded his income, and he gradually accumulated debt. No wonder he wore nice things every time we went on a date. But there is no point in regretting marriage now. Besides, I decided to get married because my husband and I got along well. It's unfortunate about the debt, but now we have no choice but to look for a solution. I tried to understand his feelings while listening to my husband's words. He probably told me because he is in considerable trouble now. If so, I thought I should understand his heart. Since we are married, we should support each other and overcome difficulties together. I reminded myself and told my husband this. It's no use blaming you for how you spent your money now. The debt is certainly affecting our current household finances, but I'm sure we can manage it.
Emma, is it okay? Will you forgive me?
My husband's eyes seemed to be filled with hope. He probably thought he would be scolded. He must have thought that I might divorce him at worst. But let's talk about everything from now on. Keeping secrets can be a cause of breaking relationships. My husband looked relieved at my words.
Thank you, Emma. I'm sorry. I'll do my best to earn your trust again.
My husband smiled happily as if he had been saved by an angel. However, I still had a credibility issue with my mother-in-law in my heart. My husband asked me not to tell my mother-in-law about the debt. Then I had no choice but to take this secret to the grave. And afterward, we purchased a house. Although the purchase was made under my name with a loan, having our own home was still a delightful thing. About a week after moving into our new place, we invited my mother-in-law over to share the news. I firmly warned my husband not to mention the ownership issue to my mother-in-law. My husband nodded in agreement, but he seemed nervous, as if he might accidentally slip up. Hopefully, nothing would go wrong. When my mother-in-law visited, she was overjoyed, but during our conversation, she said something that caught me off guard.
This house belongs to my son, right? I'd love to see what kind of home he has bought. Maybe it'll even be the house I'll live in someday. Haha.
My mother-in-law said this precisely because she didn't know everything, but when I looked at my husband's expression, he appeared quite anxious. Since it wasn't in his name, he probably felt uneasy. However, I decided to save face for my husband and assured my mother-in-law that she was welcome to visit anytime. However, my words didn't sit well with her, and she seemed dissatisfied.
You didn't buy it, did you? Yet you have the nerve to say it's okay for me to visit. You're quite thick-skinned.
I apologize. As I glared at my husband while apologizing, he averted his eyes. I wished he would at least back me up, but I knew he wouldn't. Despite my frustration with him, I suppressed my anger in the moment. Instead, I gave my husband a piece of my mind after my mother-in-law left. Can I have a word? What was that attitude earlier? I've been speaking as if you were the registered owner. If that's the case, couldn't you have defended me when Mom said something? It wouldn't hurt to do so. I laid out all my thoughts, but my husband merely apologized. His demeanor made it seem like he thought a simple apology would suffice, which only added to my irritation. Ugh. It's so frustrating. Reacting in anger wasn't the wisest move on my part. My husband, who had reached the limit of his patience, underwent a complete transformation at this moment.
But, even though the ownership might be in Emma's name, it's our home. So, This time, it's not like I'm entirely at fault, right?
What? Surprisingly, my husband, who had asked me to be the registered owner because of his debt, was now starting to act defiant. While it was true that this was our shared home, considering that I had also provided the funds, it was inconceivable for him to say such a thing. If it weren't for the debt, we wouldn't be in this situation. That day, my husband and I had a major argument. After exchanging heated words, we eventually stopped talking altogether. However, as my husband was leaving, he said something like this.
Remember this, Emma? You've angered the breadwinner of this household, so I won't care about the consequences.
It sounded like sour grapes, so I didn't pay much attention to it. But just 2 days later, something happened. On that day, my husband was away on a business trip. I was at home, having taken a day off, when my mother-in-law suddenly arrived. There was no prior notice, and my husband hadn't mentioned anything. Why was she here?
Open up, Emma. You're here, right?
From what I could see on the monitor, her expression was far from calm. She was openly hostile toward me. Although I hadn't done anything to provoke her, I couldn't just leave her standing outside, so I let her into the house. May I ask what's going on, Mom? Even as I spoke, she marched confidently into the house. She plopped down in the living room chair and gestured for me to sit as well. I sensed trouble brewing. Thinking this, I took a seat next to her.
What's the matter?
Her eyes widened, and she uttered the unexpected words.
We're selling this house.
Excuse me? What did you just say? Was I hearing things? Selling the house that was under my name? And why was she saying this? I couldn't comprehend it. But before I could ask further, my mother-in-law blurted out in anger.
This house belongs to my son and me. Don't you dare interfere.
Right. From her perspective, the house was set under my husband's name. In an attempt to calm down my enraged mother-in-law, I decided to inquire about the situation. Hold on a moment. I don't understand why you're talking about selling the house. Can you explain? To my surprise, my mother-in-law began to reveal something astonishing.
I received a consultation from my son. He complained that you are overly critical about household matters. He even mentioned that you didn't want me to live here, saying, I'm the one who bought this place.
What do you mean?
Do you get it now? Despite being the daughter-in-law, you're meddling too much, so I stepped in. Even though it's the money my son earned through hard work, you act so arrogantly. I'm actually impressed.
At that moment, my mother-in-law was still saying something to me, but it no longer reached my ears. The only words echoing in my mind were her remark, I'm the one who bought this place. How could he say that, while he's secretly hiding his debt from her? What kind of nerve does he have? Judging by my mother-in-law's demeanor, it seems she's still unaware of our financial situation. From her perspective, the owner was her son, so why was I, the daughter-in-law, complaining? It made sense in that context. But considering everything, I decided to impart some reality. It was all my husband's fault. Whatever happens, I won't back down. So, I told my mother-in-law, Mom, you're selling the house, right? As a final gesture, would you allow me to find a buyer?
Huh? You want to find one yourself?
Yes. Since I seem to have caused some trouble, I thought I'd take care of this. Consider it a sort of inconvenience fee. At that moment, my mother-in-law smirked.
Oh. You realized there's no escaping this, didn't you? Fine, I'll accept your sentiment. Go find the best buyer. Oh, and I almost forgot. I've been holding on to the divorce papers for my son. When you've sorted out your feelings, submit them.
Divorce papers?
Exactly. He seems dead serious. Well then, consider it done. And one more thing. I'll need you to pack up your belongings. We'll be appraising the house in a month.
With that, my mother-in-law left, looking quite satisfied. The fact that she handed me the divorce papers means my husband is deadly serious. And from that day on, my husband never returned home. I received a message from my mother-in-law saying that he would be working from their family home for a while. The family home and our house are about a 20-minute drive apart. The office is closer to the family home. But now I understand perfectly well. I can punish my husband without mercy. I immediately decided to contact my friend Sophia. We've been friends since college, and we still consult each other frequently. There was one reason I visited Sophia this time. A few months ago, she had just gotten divorced. When we met a month ago, she drunkenly said,
"Oh, if it were someone with Emma's personality, I wouldn't have to be so considerate while living together. Haha."
At that time, I casually brushed off her comment, but now I wondered if I could cleverly use it. "Sophia, how about sharing a house with me?"
Huh?
Sophia was surprised by my sudden proposal, but as I explained the background and revealed my plan, she enthusiastically agreed.
I'm thrilled to share a house. Let's start moving my stuff right away.
Yes. My surprise for my mother-in-law is to reveal that the house she thinks belongs to her son is actually mine. And on top of that, I'm living in a shared house. I want to see the despair on her face after all the harsh things she said. And 1 month later, my mother-in-law arrived. It was a day earlier than the appraisal date, so I wondered why she had come. When I asked, she explained that she wanted to see if I was preparing to move out. Behind her, my husband stood, as if hiding. Clearly, he hadn't told my mother-in-law about the house's ownership and the debt. I escorted them to the entrance, but as they attempted to enter the house, I stopped them. "Excuse me, please don't enter without permission."
Huh? What are you talking about? This is my son's and my house. We have the right to enter, don't we?
She sought my husband's agreement, but he remained silent. "Mom, have you seen the property registration certificate?" My words made my husband visibly anxious. He knew this situation was inevitable from the start, but his inability to speak up was his fault. I proceeded to reveal the truth to my mother-in-law without mercy. "This is the property registration certificate I obtained. Take a look. Do you understand that I am the owner of this house?"
But isn't this house owned by my son? After all, he's the breadwinner, and he has more money than you.
As she began to say this, I interjected forcefully. "You haven't heard it from your son, have you? About the debt and who the actual owner of this house is?"
What are you talking about? Debt?
I prompted my husband to speak up. He hesitated but, under pressure from my mother-in-law, finally confessed.
I'm sorry for keeping this from you. I was in debt. That's why I couldn't manage, and I asked Emma to be the loan guarantor.
My mother-in-law's expression tightened, and panic was evident.
Wait a minute. So why didn't you say anything until now?
I thought I'd get scolded.
My mother-in-law held her head in her hands, sighing. She exclaimed,
Why didn't you tell me sooner? The appraiser is coming tomorrow, and I plan to use the money from selling this house for renovations on our current home. What are we going to do now?
I'm sorry. I wanted to tell you many times, but I lacked the courage.
I never imagined my husband was so spineless. Watching my mother-in-law's pitying expression, I seized the moment.
I apologize, Emma. Ignorance is no excuse, and I'm truly sorry. But, despite everything, could you avoid divorce? If you continue like this, there will be nothing left. So, can we start anew by wiping the slate clean?
I had been waiting for this moment. After all her criticism of others, she now wanted help when she was in a tight spot. A sweet irony indeed. And then, Sophia arrived. My mother-in-law was surprised to see her.
Who are you? Emma's friend?
Yes. Oh, but we're also housemates. Emma is single now, you see.
As soon as Sophia said that, my mother-in-law froze. She probably understood. My mother-in-law had already conveyed my husband's intention for divorce to me. So, the term single likely made sense to her. Our relationship was no longer that of husband and wife. Besides, the appraisal result didn't matter. From the beginning, the house was in my name, and my husband couldn't even afford the loan payments. After a brief pause following Sophia's statement, I informed my mother-in-law, given that, unfortunately, we can't start anew. His belongings are all packed up. Feel free to take them. My mother-in-law stood there, stunned, and my husband looked pale. Afterward, they both left, shoulders slumped. The recent events seemed to have caused significant emotional distress for both of them. The original intention was to send the appraiser away when they arrived tomorrow, but witnessing their despair was satisfying. Since then, my husband has been profusely apologizing to my mother-in-law. Keeping the debt a secret led to the worst possible outcome. Well, that's hardly surprising. Although the house was purchased during our marriage, it's subject to property division. Despite being the owner, I can't make decisions unilaterally without my husband's input. So, I hired a lawyer experienced in such matters and had several discussions with my husband. The outcome: I'll continue paying the mortgage for this house, and I won't make any claims against my husband. In return, other property divisions won't be recognized. My husband agreed and signed off. If he had suggested splitting the proceeds from selling the house, I wonder how I would have reacted, but in the heat of the moment, he didn't consider that possibility. And now, in the aftermath of the divorce, the burden of my husband's debt falls heavily on my mother-in-law. She had been living off her pension, but it wasn't enough, so she began working part-time. However, considering her age, this situation can't continue indefinitely. In reality, after work, she's always exhausted and barely able to move. If only my husband had been honest from the start, my mother-in-law could have led a normal life. As for my husband, it seems debt collectors have been hounding him near his workplace. Despite my mother-in-law's assistance, it still wasn't enough. Desperate, he apologized profusely, but these people weren't forgiving. He ended up leaving his job and was referred to another place where he's been working for the past few years. His take-home pay is meager, with most of it going toward repayments. To make matters worse, he lives on-site in a less-than-ideal environment. Since then, I've been enjoying my shared house with Sophia. Both of us have experienced divorce, yet our days are far from gloomy. Although living together as friends could have strained our relationship, we've managed to maintain a comfortable distance. We continue to support each other, just as before. By the way, I handle the rent, which is essentially the mortgage payment, while Sophia covers utilities and daily expenses. It's a kind of unspoken agreement, and referring to Sophia as the buyer doesn't seem far off. We've settled into our roles, finding life after marriage much easier. While future remarriage might change our living arrangement, our bond will likely remain unchanged. I hope to remain lifelong friends with Sophia. How did you like this video? Please subscribe to my channel. See you in the next video.